Odaso. So to come back to a really fundamental theme that will keep on coming up through these next 5 days, something to be tested. And that is the very notion, the hypothesis, that we make ourselves unnecessarily vulnerable to suffering by identifying with that which is not I or mine as being such. It's very simple. But we see this can pertain to really anything. If you identify with a football team, which a lot of people do, and your team loses, then you suffer. You didn't have to, but you will. And the more strongly you identify with, the stronger your suffering can be when they lose. You know? And it's what could be more obvious than the players of the Manchester United, that's what I remember. Manchester United. Isn't it perfectly obvious that all the players of Manchester United don't have any idea who you are? You may identify with them, but they don't identify with you. And they don't belong to you in any sense of the term. And that's just one of many examples. There's simply a group of men who have been paid very fat salaries to kick a ball around. And people get very excited about that, apparently. But we identify with so many things that are not I or mine. And every time we do it, we just set ourselves up. It's like going into a boxing ring with our chin out, just waiting to be punched. And we will be. So, but where it's very up close and personal, of course, is with the body. And the more strongly, it's a gradient, but the more strongly we identify with the body, the more we make ourselves vulnerable to suffering. Every change, maybe of aging, every change of I don't know, the body becoming less pleasant to look at, or becoming ill, aging, sickness, and so forth. And that death itself, insofar as we're identifying with the body, death is going to be really a blow, you know. And yet all of that unnecessary. So for the body and for the mind, you see this explicitly when you're in a very lucid dream, that whatever takes place in that domain, which is all your mind, you see for yourself explicitly. And I'm going to pluck a phrase from a Dzogchen Shamatha text. You'll have this non-conceptual certainty that whatever happens in the mind, it cannot possibly harm you. And that's not talking about dream yoga. That's talking about a practice we're now segueing into. But cultivating a very similar type of awareness, of resting in awareness and observing the mind without getting caught up in it, entangled in it, identifying with it. And so when the practice we're about to begin, and will continue for certainly in the next day or two, of clearly, discerningly, attentively, and with a lot of interest, observing the mind, but without identifying with it, without letting our awareness slip into it and get caught up in the desires and so on. Insofar as we do that and can maintain that clear, cognizant, but very present and very caring perspective on the mind, insofar as we can really master that, then whatever happens in the mind, we witness it, we're totally present with it, but it doesn't get to us. We're not upset by it, we're not disturbed by it. And so we see the parallel is almost like a mirror reflection of becoming very, very lucid in a dream, witnessing everything in the dream, but having this non-conceptual awareness, knowing, certainty. Whatever comes up in the dream, it has no power to harm me. You just know that, right? And that's being lucid with respect to your mind in the dream state, and the exact corollary in the waking state is something that also takes a good deal of training. But the payoff, the benefits from it are just amazing. To be able to not, again, withdraw from the mind, which then you can only do for so long, and then sooner or later the mind's going to come back and haunt you. It's going to get you again. So that's only a short-term relief of withdrawing from by going and taking drugs, by getting drunk, by going asleep, by going into deep samadhi. This was territory very well explored before the Buddha ever came along. Because there were these yogis, these rishis and so forth, hundreds of years, maybe even 1,000 or 2 years before the Buddha came along, who were looking for moksha. They were looking for relief from freedom from suffering. And centuries before the Buddha ever came along, they developed such deep insight, such deep, not so much insight, but samadhi, that like like a burning ember that you just plunge right into the snow and it just melts right on through. They were able to penetrate right through the veils of the human mind arising in dependence upon the brain. They didn't know much about the brain, but they certainly knew a lot about the human mind. They're able to penetrate through that right to what Indians used, maybe still call jiva, kind of a life continuum. They might call it Atman, self. We may call it substrate consciousness, we may call it Bhavanga, we may call it subtle continuum of consciousness. But this is very well explored territory. Tremendous discoveries, many of them, had been made prior to the time of the Buddha. He was coming into, I would say, I think it's an objectively true statement, Gautama took birth in the most contemplatively advanced civilization on the planet. I think so. And also, where else in the world, what other culture, if you had to be a man, so it's still patriarchal, before the Buddha, but what other culture could you just tell society around you, I give up all attachment to having my own family and spouse and children and ownership and wealth and so forth. I'm giving that all up. I completely release it because I find no taste there, no attraction. And I'm willing to now just dedicate my whole life to the pursuit of truth, to understanding reality in order to find moksha, liberation. And so this is what I will do. Will you all just give me a free lunch? Will you give me a free meal every day? That's all I'm asking. Nothing luxurious, but if I go on an alms round, will you put some food in my bowl, enough to get me through the day? What other society? I don't think there was one. If you know of it, I'm not here to teach a doctrine, but I don't know of any. But India was such. So when Gautama left home at the age of 29, he didn't have to worry about starving to death because he had made that sacrifice. So he knew, no matter what, if he went out for alms, yep, there will be people that say, good on you. You're going to do something, hopefully, that can benefit all of us. If you find something about moksha, something about liberation, freedom, we're happy to give you lunch. No breakfast, no dinner. And don't come after noon. We'll be busy. But before noon, you can come anytime, and yes, we're going to give you some rice, some beans, whatever. Whatever we have, we'll give you, it's a portion. You're a cheap date. You're really a cheap date. And so they're willing to do that, and that was commonplace. And they could be theistic, non-theistic, they were just sannyasis. They were just shramanas, wandering ascetics that gave up everything, including family and all of that, security, giving up security entirely, just to devote themselves to truth. That's where Gautama chose to take birth. To just finish a thought, centuries and centuries, I can't say how many, but samadhi was an ancient discipline. It could have easily been 2,000 years old by the time Gautama came along. There are what are called terracotta statues, I think found in Afghanistan, 5,000 years old, of a figure sitting in full lotus. I doubt that he was sitting in that posture to eat beans and rice. Probably not, probably meditating, right? And so that's 5,000 years, that's 2,500 years before the Buddha. And that's just at Satsang. It probably didn't start on the day that Satsang or that terracotta statue was made. And so what had been discovered and replicated and replicated and replicated by the time the Buddha came along is so many yogis who had achieved deep samadhi had discovered that they could recall past lives. And it said in the Buddhist literature, some could recall 10,000. 10,000, this is pre-Buddhist. Their samadhi was so deep and they could so go into the hard drive of what we'll call the substrate consciousness and just retrieve and retrieve and retrieve. It said of Pythagoras that he could recall 20. Not bad. But in India, the mother lode of this. So this, just the reality of suffering, unless we just blow them all off, well, what do they know? What do they know? They just develop samadhi. But we know a lot more about the brain. We don't know anything at all about the origins of consciousness. But they'd gone right into it, penetrated that. And then when you see in the past lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and here you are on one more, then it doesn't take too much imagination. This is probably not the last one. So when they're addressing the issue of suffering and the causes of suffering, it takes on, I would say, an infinitely greater gravitas than just thinking, how can I have less suffering before I die, when of course all lights will go out anyway. So this is like playing poker for peanut shells. Let's try to practice Dharma until we die. But of course, it's then all bets off because it's game over. And you get free liberation from suffering and its causes just because, that's really, Paul, what a relief. But they had already seen that just wasn't true. And it was based upon such incredibly deep, penetrating insight into consciousness. And so this is a commonplace. So Gautama, when he left home, he knew there was 1,000, 2,000 years of history behind him, before him. So he knew when he left home that he's not leaving home to try to find freedom from suffering before he dies, in which case, then he's just going to be gone. So that first reality is really enormous. If there really is no natural escape, all you have to do is die from reality, then penetrating into the deep, deep sources of what really makes us vulnerable to suffering takes on just a massive significance. And so what had been tried before the Buddha, 1,000, 2,000, maybe 3,000 years before, was recognizing in this world of change, this world that we can all perceive. We can perceive animals, we can perceive human beings, and they saw perfectly well. There's just tremendous amount of suffering here. They could see that, it's kind of obvious. And so they thought of one strategy that makes really, really good sense. All the suffering I experience in this world comes from my interaction with it. Other people, situations, and so forth. So why don't I just say no thank you and just withdraw from the world? But then I've withdrawn with my body and my mind, and boy, they can churn up a lot of suffering, right? Sickness, aging, and all that business. And then the mind has so much congestion and disturbances and unhappiness and so forth. And so then they thought, how about we not only withdraw from society and just go out for a free lunch and then come right back in again, but how about withdrawing really deeply, going so deeply into samadhi that your body fades out, becomes history, just no longer on the horizon. That just your awareness simply completely withdrawn from it. So whatever happens, you don't even notice. Then whatever happens in the body that's unpleasant, you won't experience it, you'll be free. And then the mind, which is such a complicated scenario, why not just withdraw from the mind as well? Just go deep, deep, just plunge right into the depths of consciousness, right into the substrate. And if you can go even further away, just keep on going further away from your body and your mind, let alone the surrounding environment. Just keep on going further away. Go into the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana, where you've even transcended not only suffering, but also sukha, happiness. There's no pleasure. It's just an ocean of equanimity in the fourth jhana. And you're in this purely archetypal realm called the form realm, which it looks like Pythagoras knew about. Plato probably knew about it, because the descriptions are so close. But even there thinking, could there be even a deeper peace? Can I even get further away from this world of change, vicissitude, so much dukkha and dissatisfaction? And then penetrating right through the form realm, into the formless realm. Boundless consciousness, not omniscience, but just kind of a sense of open, expansive consciousness. And then going deep, first of all, open space, just vast, expansive space. The first absorption. Going deeper, cutting through beyond that to consciousness, beyond that to a sheer vacuity, like the substrate on steroids. Just total nothingness. And thinking, wow, if you got there, I think this is the end of samsara. This is nothing at all. And people could abide in that for days, weeks at a time. Could easily think, okay, this is out of samsara. This is just nothing. And then somebody thought maybe there's something further. And they actually found a deeper samapati, or absorption, neither perception nor non-perception, just inconceivable, but even subtler than nothing. And people who got there thought, this has got to be it. I'm so far away from samsara, it'll never catch me again. Really. That world of change, aging, sickness, death, they'll never find me. I'm so high up here in the stratosphere. They shoot the rockets at me and sorry. So those are the two people Gautama met after he left home. One had achieved that state of nothingness, thought he'd arrived. Gautama reached it so quickly. He was probably flabbergasted, but he achieved it really quickly. And his teacher said, good, fantastic, you're free, I'm free, let's teach together. And Gautama said, not so fast, maybe there's more. And then he sought out the second teacher, which is even the highest one. It's called the summit. Buddhists call it the summit of samsara. They call it moksha, they call it liberation. And again, being the incredible prodigy that he was, He achieved that very rapidly, and his teacher very graciously said, good, one more liberated being, teach with me. But what Gautama saw is you can run, but you can't hide. That is, you can run and run deeper, deeper, deeper into samadhi, but sooner or later, you need to come out. To get a meal, take care of your body, but you need to come out. And when you come out, he had the probably unprecedented perspicacity to see that when he came out, he's going for alms, he's just doing the mundane things that you need to do with your body. He could see that something his teachers couldn't see, and that is, I haven't gone anywhere. That was just a temporary excursion into these inconceivably subtle realms of consciousness. But here, nothing fundamentally has shifted, and I'm not out. And that's the point at which he very courteously then disengaged from his teachers and said, I need to keep on looking. This was great, but it's not enough. And so that tact, or that strategy was very well tried. It was ancient history, and a lot of people thought it was a total success, of just total withdrawal from phenomenal reality. But it's like it's just stretching a rubber band longer, 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 but it doesn't snap, and you comes snapping right back. And so the alternative of just total immersion, like what were those Greeks? Were they Dionysians? That just said, live life to the fullest? Were they Dionysians? Who was it? Or there's another word for it. Dionysians, it works. But just live life to the fullest. Drink, eat, drink and marry, have the greatest time you can, you'll be dead soon. So that was kind of like push samsara to the limit. Max it out. As my old friend Matthieu Ricard says, live a colorful life. Or live a colorful life. You know? He says it much better than I do. But so one escape, because we all want to be free of suffering, and one escape is just jump into the deep end of samsara and have the best time you possibly can. And make use of everything available. Drugs and booze and music and alcohol and food and vacations. Get wealth, learn how to spend it well, because you can just totally max out and lose yourself. Lose yourself in just one entertainment, one pleasure excursion after another, as you're getting older and older and older, and less able to enjoy it. And then die. So there's one strategy. We're still working on that one. In the West, I think we're just doing this better than anybody ever had. You know, the entertainment we have, the pleasures we have available, what money can buy, man, does it make samsara look good. You know? And so we're really, really working on that one yet. Still working on that one. It's looking pretty good until we hear about big celebrities, billionaires offing themselves. So Jeffrey Epstein had a nice time until he didn't. And he hung himself. But good-looking man, billions of dollars, as much sex as he could possibly handle. And then prison cell and kills himself. That didn't turn out too well. And so we can try to escape from suffering by immersing ourselves in samsara. And one of the biggest addictions is work, because you get praised for that one. If you just become a sex addict, nobody really praises you unless they're just jealous. If you become gambling or some alcohol or drugs, people don't praise you. But if you immerse yourself in work, you're putting in 16 hours a day, just pedal to the metal, nose to the grindstone, and losing yourself entirely in work. People say, wow, he's a real hard worker. Very productive member of society. And it's all escapism. Because when you're immersed in your work, when your awareness fuses with your computer screen, your plans, your business plans, your portfolio, etc., then you lose yourself for a while. And then after a while you don't, and there you are. And you look in the mirror, you're naked, and you just look like anybody else. And you're getting old, and you're going to be dead soon. So we have that one strategy, lose yourself in samsara, and just try to do the best job you can of it. And then we have the old system that we don't try much anymore, but the Indians certainly did, and that is just withdraw. So it's total immersion or total withdrawal. And those are two strategies we've really given it a good chance. But Gautama, already having experienced total immersion in samsara as a prince, he had it, as much sex as he wanted, and food and drink and respect and so forth. He already figured that one out by the time he was 29. That's no escape. Then he tried for 6 years the other one. That was no escape. But the middle way there, of being face-on with reality, and not immersing yourself in it, and not recoiling, not withdrawing, but then not misapprehending. He found that it's not samadhi that is key to liberation, nor is it immersion in sensual pleasures. It's actually only wisdom that actually frees you, and it frees you in the world. This is not unique to Buddhism, but certainly for the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the real benefits, as St. Augustine said, brilliant man, brilliant theologian, brilliant philosopher. Whether we agree with him or not, he was certainly brilliant. And he stated, quite unequivocally, as an experienced contemplative, he was not just an intellectual, but he was a very serious meditator, had some profound experiences. But he said, and it became really the statement for Christian contemplative life for the next 1,000 years at least, and that is the contemplative life can be begun in this lifetime, but can come to its culmination only in the hereafter. So you can start up here, but you can't come to the perfection, the culmination. You can't, when you have the deepest insight, the deepest face-to-face knowing of the mind of God, which he claimed to have had, you can't sustain it. You can't sustain it. You can take it for a little while, maybe a half an hour, and then you just can't sustain it. And you fall back. And contemplatives for centuries in the Christian tradition have spoken of the glories of having this intimate knowing of God, but then not being able to sustain the intensity of that so-called face-to-face encounter, and then falling back. And the sadness when you're falling back and knowing where you're falling. But then the hope that, well, at least when you die, then you'll be able to sustain it. So it's in the afterlife. I'm not going to contest that, and that's the widespread belief, and I see why they believe it. And of course, for most Buddhists, liberation does lie in the future. But Gautama achieved it in this lifetime, and Arhat after Arhat in this lifetime. In the Mahayana tradition, the many siddhas, mahasiddhas of India, Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, Mongolia, and so forth, have shown you can actually be free in this lifetime, totally free, and yet still have a body, still be there. So that's the path we're following here. So where we'll go in meditation now will not be withdrawing from the body and mind. It will not be immersing ourselves as usual in the identification with the fusion of our awareness with the sensations of the body or the activities of the mind, but trying to maintain that clarity, that stillness, unelaborated, which is non-conceptual but discerningly intelligent, being present with, so you can see why people might say, this body is here for me, but it doesn't belong to me. I don't own it. These sensations are here for me. Nobody else can pick them up. They're for me. It's a private showing. The sensations arising in so-called my body. But they're not really mine. They're just arising for me. Therefore, I have sensations. I have a body. And then on a deeper level, this mind isn't mine. It has nothing in it that's really mine. It's certainly not I. But I have a private showing, apart from clairvoyant people that might be peeping toms, checking into my mind. But apart from that, there's a private showing. And all these thoughts, these desires, these memories, they're all arising for me. But they're not mine. And to see that and to know that is to be free in the midst of appearances without having to escape from them or fuse with them. So having said that for the waking state, just translate it right over to lucid dreaming. And there it is, it's exactly the same. So to come to know the nature of the dreams, the nature of the existence of dreams, that they appear but they're not really there, nothing in the dream objectively or subjectively has any inherent existence. That's easier. That's easier than in this intersubjective reality where you are all definitely not figments of my imagination any more than I'm a figment of your imagination. I die, you're still there. You die, I'm still here. We are not figments. There's no solipsism here. Whereas when you are dreaming, and there are many people, maybe 200 people in a room, and you're dreaming of 200 people in the room, and then the dream fades out, where do you think all those people go? Well, they were never there in the first place. They're not people. Any more than the images you see on a television screen are people. They look like people. They talk like people. But it's an empty appearance. And so dreams and waking reality are very different, and it's easier to recognize the emptiness of inherent nature of everything taking place in the dream. It's easier to recognize nothing there is really yours. And if you gain that insight, and this is where dream yoga, lucid dreaming dream yoga, can be a very, very powerful step, big step, for waking up and then exploring, as we will over the next few days, exploring this reality and really investigating the theme. It is said that this is dream-like, not dream, not the same, but it's dream-like. And then we can ask, how like? How similar is it? And that's what we'll be investigating for these next 4 days, 5 days. Good. So, let's take one more step, one little step for man. Let's go back, and we'll take one more interval step before we go full on into taking the mind as the path, settling the mind in its natural state. We'll take a halfway step there now. It could be said of our modern society, which is now global, that many of us, or society at large, is addicted to stimulation. It's very common now, more so than ever before. Always wanting arousal, stimulation, sensory, mental, keep it going. But now we choose an alternative. Not that there's anything wrong with stimulation, but being addicted to it can be a problem. Of seeking instead peace of mind, an inner quiet, an inner contentment, free of stimulation, but discovering through experience a different quality of well-being, even a different quality of joy itself, that is not contingent upon stimulation. So we begin, as always, with settling body, speech, and mind in the natural state. I've spoken at some length and will speak much more about the deeply ingrained tendency to project upon reality that which is not there, and then to conflate our thoughts, expectations, projections, conflate them with reality itself. A skillful means to overcome that tendency is to just get the mind to quiet down. And this is where mindfulness of breathing really shows great promise. So as a prelude to the main practice for this session, let's count just 21 breaths. One staccato count at the end of inhalation or exhalation, as you choose. Full body awareness, focusing in the abdomen, the apertures of the nostrils, whatever you like. And between counts, let your mind be as silent and continuously mindful as you can, as you calm the turbulence of the conceptual mind. 21 counts. When you finish, let your awareness rest. Just pause. Rest in its own nature, simply being present. Like a person who's climbed to the peak of a tall mountain and without moving can gaze down into the valleys below or up into the sky above. Let's spend the next half of the remaining minutes of this session gazing down into the valley below. From this stillness of awareness, direct the light of your awareness to the somatic field. Simply a domain of experience. You don't need to visualize the body. Just that domain of experience in which tactile sensations arise, from the soles of your feet to the crown of the head. Attend to the domain, the space, the field in which all manner of tactile sensations arise. Focus there single-pointedly. And discerningly observe the array, the diversity of tactile sensations that arise within this field. Sensations of firmness and solidity, earth element, moisture, water. Observing some regions of the field are cooler, some warmer, fire element. And observing all manner of movement, tingling, vibration, movements of all kinds, air element. None of them belong to anyone. They're simply arising and passing within this field. From the stillness of your awareness, observe the comings and goings, the rising and passings of all manner of tactile events within the field. Sustain the stillness of your awareness in the face of the movements within this somatic field. And observing them closely, can you detect anything arising within this field that is unchanging, durable? Or is everything arising within a flux of change? Buddhist analysis of what we're observing. The sensations, firmness, moisture, and so on, these are appearances, objective appearances rising up to meet you, presenting themselves to your awareness, illuminated by your awareness. They're objective. But within the same field, this tactile field, you're bound to experience discomfort, utterly neutral feelings that are neither pleasant nor unpleasant, perhaps even pleasant feelings here and there. These are feelings, they're not tactile sensations. Feelings as in pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And the Buddhist analysis is that feelings are not objective appearances. They do not simply present themselves to you. But feelings are the manner in which we experience the tactile sensations. They're not the same. We experience tactile sensations in a pleasant way, unpleasant, neutral, and then call them pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. But it's not objective. It's in our way of experiencing that is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. See if you can observe these subjectively arising feelings. See too that they also are always changing and have no owner. You can observe them without fusing your awareness with them. If if you maintain this space-like awareness that is unmoving, that does not merge with the sensations or feelings, let your awareness return. Withdraw the light of your awareness back into itself. For a moment, let your awareness be self-illuminating. As if you'd already achieved shamatha. And you're simply resting in this self-illuminating mindfulness, aware of the empty space of the mind. Now once again, open the eyes, at least partially, and vacantly rest your gaze in the space in front of you without focusing on any object, any shape or color. Your gaze vacant, as if you were just daydreaming, but you're not. Let your awareness continue to sit unmoving upon its throne. And now selectively focus the light of your awareness to illuminate 1 out of 6 domains. The mental domain. Turning away from all the 5 sensory domains, focus single-pointedly on the domain in which purely mental events take place. And observe them in exactly the same way you observed the tactile sensations and feelings arising in the somatic field. Observe the variety of mental events taking place, some of them objective. Mental images, memories. Discursive thought just rising in the space of the mind that you witness rather than thinking. There are objective appearances within the space and also subjective impulses. Feelings, desires, emotions, and so on. From the stillness of your awareness, take it all in. Observe whatever comes up from moment to moment and simply observe its nature without being drawn away to the referent of the thought, the memory, and so on. Whatever comes up, just let it be. Without perpetuating it, right? Without trying to alter it, without trying to terminate it. Passively, without interfering with anything, observe closely whatever arises in the space of the mind. In short, become lucid with the space of your mind and all the activities within it. Clearly observing, but not merging with, not getting caught up in. Not identifying with or reifying anything that takes place in the space of the mind. if you wish to understand the nature of the mind like any other natural phenomenon, observe it closely. If you wish to understand the nature of consciousness like any other natural phenomenon, observe it closely. So for the remaining moments of this session, let's relax again. Withdraw the light of your awareness away from the mental domain. And simply rest right where you are. Awareness resting in its own place, knowing itself. Within Indian and then Tibetan Buddhism, for good 2,000 years or so, there's a lot of philosophy, and not just one. So there's no such thing as Buddhist philosophy as one monolithic entity, there's many. But just within this current from India up to Nepal, up to Tibet, up to Mongolia, that north-south axis, then there are four ways of viewing reality. They're philosophical systems, but they're not just something to think about, they're actually ways of viewing reality, which is the whole point. The Tibetan word for theory means actually, it's tawa, which means to look, it's a way of observing, seeing, viewing. And so the most fundamental, the foundational level, entry level in Buddhist philosophy is called Vaibhashika, Abhidhamma Kosha and so forth, written within that context. So I won't go, this is not going to be a big philosophy lesson, but I'll point out something that's a bit intriguing about this entry level. And that is, I've spoken previously of metaphysical realism, the belief there's a real world out there, and there's a real subjective world of mind in here. And there's one accurate description, because it is the way it is, and if you map onto it, you got it right. So metaphysical realism, which makes an awful lot of sense. So if it's not true, there have to be some very compelling reasons to abandon it. But something definitely more primitive or basic than metaphysical realism is called naive realism. And this is embraced by many, many people who really don't care anything about philosophy, don't care anything about epistemology or neuroscience or physics. Most people don't, frankly. And they're simply making their way through the world, trying to get by, make a living, raise their kids, find some happiness. And so people are philosophically unreflective by default, because they're really not thinking about these things, can very easily, and I think generally do, you can decide as well as I, they may simply assume without ever questioning it, that when they look around themselves to the various colors of the room, that those walls over there, way over there, over here, the curtain up here, they really have the colors that they do. Those colors they really, the wall's out there, and the color of the wall is beige, and that for beige is out there. And I heard this sound from a long distance. The sound came from a very long distance, and the smells are definitely out there. Like a vacuum sweeper, I just sweep them up, and there they are. And then the food is full of flavor. All I have to do is I pull out the flavor with my tongue, but the food is full of flavor. And then, of course, tactile sensations, they're really there. This water is really warm, this is really solid. And so really the total fusion of qualia with objective reality, and assuming that we're just seeing what's really there, and that our senses are relatively passive. They're just picking up colors that are out there, picking up sounds that are out there, smells that are in the atmosphere, tastes that are in the food. So basically our five senses are just like flypaper, just picking up what's already there, which doesn't give the whole brain a whole lot to do. And so it's called naive realism. And that's actually not challenged. Naive realism is not challenged in this Vaibhashika system. That they say colors, well, they're out there, look, there they are. But that's not, I think it's because they're not, people who are advocating this, immersing themselves. Bear in mind, in Buddhist philosophy, it's not just something they would think about, write papers, and get tenure. It's there, for every branch of Buddhist philosophy, there's always practice to fully integrate with it. Always. It's always for the sake of finding liberation, never to just have intellectual candy or make it get a job and so forth. And so they weren't really asking that question. I don't think they gave it deep thought, but rather what they're really interested in is coming back to suffering. They just don't veer from that. And this is now going to relate to the dreamlike nature of reality in the waking state, in a way that I think very few people teach, but then the 10 analogies are there right in the Pali Canon, the dreamlike nature of this reality. But let's try this on for size, because although this is elementary, this isn't even Newtonian physics, this is Galilean dynamics. It's not nearly as sophisticated as Newton, but it's based on close observation, as Galileo did, both for terrestrial physics and astronomy. He was one very good observer. And so they were interested in, why are we suffering so much? And then and the Buddha himself, they didn't make this up, but the Buddha himself spoke of 3 marks of existence. And this is going to pertain directly to dreamlike nature of reality in the waking state. And that is the first one. All of these 3, the way we get ourselves into trouble and set ourselves up for suffering is by superimposing on reality that which isn't there. It's really so I call it a cognitive hyperactivity disorder, of superimposing that which isn't there, and then assuming that it's completely fused with what is there. In other words, not being able to discern the difference between what you're projecting on reality and what reality is presenting to you. Now, in extreme cases, and I witnessed this a long time ago when I was in Dharamsala, just because I was living in the Dalai Lama's physician's house, I had 3 very close encounters. I just don't know why, but it happened over the course of about 1 year. 3 encounters with women of my generation, early 20s, and each one of which was schizophrenic. I mean, severely schizophrenic. And I was living in his home, and these women or their friends brought these women one by one over the course of a year or so to the Dalai Lama's doctor's clinic. And I was the liaison because I could speak Tibetan pretty quickly. And so, from a complete lay perspective, with absolutely no expertise whatsoever, I had 3 very close-up encounters with schizophrenia. They were all very unhappy, desperately unhappy. One of them we had to watch very closely to make sure she wouldn't commit suicide. So I'm speaking here as a complete layperson, no pretense of having any real insight here, but just part of my experience. But what was so obvious to me is all I could offer them was kindness, and that's all I offered them. I had no knowledge, no skills, nothing. But they kind of hung out with me because they could speak English, and nobody else in the house could. So they kind of stuck with me a little bit. And what was clear is they had no ability, each one of them had no ability at all to distinguish between the fabrications of their mind and what reality is presenting to them. One of them said, the devil's inside of me. Took it very realistically. I'm sure that was very true for her. That's how she perceived her reality. So when we look at this tendency that I think we all are subject to, of superimposing, transference, expectation, preconception, projection, superimposition, we do it. But when we do it to a severe level, to a very deep level, then it really is psychotic and leads to desperate unhappiness, because they really could not distinguish between the intersubjective reality of everybody around them and their own world, which was completely mind-created. So it was incredibly sad. So I'm simply pointing, this is a spectrum. I want to give tribute to Western psychology. Sometimes I've seemed critical, I'm sure. But in all of Buddhism, I think I kind of know the bandwidth. There's, to my knowledge, certainly not for Tibetan Buddhism, to my knowledge, in the whole of Buddhism, I've never encountered any section or any spectrum of teaching that is specifically designed to diagnose and to treat mental disease, as in bipolar, schizophrenia, paranoia, and other utterly debilitating mental diseases, even including acute and severe depression. I've never seen it. And Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings, and that of all the philosophical schools, is really not designed to heal people who are severely mentally impaired. And so it's a great big lacuna. It's not there. And Western clinical psychology, psychiatry, has, over the last 150 years, come up with so much valuable knowledge and therapy, and drugs when needed. If you need to suppress the symptoms, then do it. They don't heal, and that's what the therapist is for. But that's where Buddhism has a lot to learn. One area. Because Buddhism just doesn't have any psychopathology. It's for ordinary people wanting to become liberated, not for seriously mentally ill people wanting to get well. So that's one area where there can be great complementarity. But simply to show that it's the same tendency. So in my view of sanity and insanity, healthy people and unhealthy people mentally, to my mind it's perfectly obvious that it's a completely smooth spectrum. There is no division. We go, oh, you just made the cut, you're healthy. Oh, just missed the cut, you're unhealthy. You need a therapist. Thank goodness you don't. You're on the good side. There's no border. And also then, just one point, and then we'll get to this, is the demarcation between sanity and sanity. Might that have anything to do with the overall sanity of a society? Is it an absolute? Or might it be relative to this society, that society, that society? In Nazi Germany in 1938, exactly what was sane and what wasn't sane. In America, in the heart of the slave country, 18th, 19th, even 20th century, what's sane and what's not sane vis-a-vis people of color? And what is sane considered to be perfectly fine? What's insane, really, was considered to be just hunky-dory. And if a black person does something you don't like, you just kill him. It's property, so you lose some property, but that's it. How, is that sane? For them, yes. And so the demarcation then varies. In Buddhism, the benchmark of genuine sanity, is raised quite high. But we'll get to that perhaps later. But right now to the dreamlike nature of reality, 3 marks of existence, the dreamlike nature of this reality right here. And look at this constant theme, conflating that we are superimposing upon the reality. Extreme cases, people with psychosis. Moderate cases, neurosis. And then there's normal, but it's all in the same spectrum. Here's one, and that is, first of all, an observation. From the Buddhist perspective, carefully observing, monitoring, being mindful of, in very discerning ways, the whole of reality, objective, subjective, mental, physical, and so forth, just perceiving that what reality is dishing up in this whole conditioned world, where causality is really how things arise, and not divine superimposition, invention, what's it called? Not invention, what? Intervention, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. So, in Buddhism, there are no acts of God. If there's a hurricane, or there's a typhoon, or tsunami, nobody says, oh, there goes the Buddha again, I wish he hadn't done that. It's looked at for natural causes. Buddhism is 100% naturalistic. It's not materialistic, which I find extremely unnatural, to think only material things exist. It's ridiculous. Nothing natural about that. But naturalistic in the sense that suffering is natural. It's not imposed by God or fate or karma or Buddha. It's just the way things are in this world. And then when you're looking, this is very important, when you're looking for the causes, again, you don't do God, why did you do it? Or to Adam and Eve, or to fate, or karma is kind of like some big thing that hits you. But you look within the world of phenomena, which is the natural world, and within that world of experience, then you see if you can identify those elements that are crucial for making you vulnerable to suffering, and they're all natural. Mental afflictions. Liberation is something experiential, it's natural, and then the path is entirely natural. So we don't look to supernatural agency to understand the nature of suffering or why we're suffering. But we come back to this theme, the first one being impermanence. Upon close inspection, everything we're experiencing in this world that arises independent upon causal conditions is not only impermanent in the sense that sooner or later it won't be here. That's called course impermanence, like building a house and knowing sooner or later there won't be a house there anymore. Or you have this body for a while and then you won't. That's course impermanent, alive, 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 dead, gone, turned into something else. But subtle impermanence in the sense that everything in a constant state of flux, the whole world, the sensory world, the mental world, everything conditioned, constantly arising and passing, rising and passing, constantly, with nothing to hold on to, nothing stable, nothing enduring. And say, that's the way it is. That's what we saw, that's what we observed, that's the way things are. But that can be unbearable. Where's your security? We want to be secure, we want to be free of anxiety. But if your whole body is in constant state of flux, your mind, your relationships, the people you know, your loved ones, your possessions, your environment, the weather, everything is in a constant state of utter unpredictable impermanence, not knowing when anything is just going to completely vanish off the face of reality. How can anybody be happy? How can anybody feel secure? It's like being out in the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean. How do you feel secure? Because there's nothing stable. You're not on an ice flow, it's all fluid. And so we just find that very difficult to bear. I think it's very difficult to bear. How can you relax when everything's in a state of flux? And what can you hold on to think I can take refuge in this. And so the way you can do that, and we do it, see whether you have ever done it, is then we just project permanence where it isn't. And it comes up everywhere. I finally got a secure job. I've got a house now and I'm making all the payments. I really wanted a kid, now I've got a kid. I was looking for a meaningful relationship, a stable relationship. I finally found the right person. And I'll love her forever. She promised the same thing. It's going to be forever. Forever. Finally I got that relationship. I feel complete now, somebody I can really count on. And so we project to make ourselves feel that sense of security, free of anxiety. I'm making enough money now I'm stable. I used to be in transition. For a while there I was in transition. But now things have settled down. And now I feel really comfortable. Things are now going well. I'm feeling really good now. I feel really good about myself. Economic, social, personal, things are going well. And so now I'm really content. Things are good. How are you? Good. I'm good. Oh, you're in transition, are you? Oh, you just had a breakup? I'm sorry. I hope you get where I am. I'm in a stable relationship. And it really feels good. Just like sucking your thumb. You're not getting anything out of it, but it can kind of give you a little bit of solace. If you don't have a thumb, then, oh, there's one. And so people who are living in that little balloon, that little cocoon, that little make-believe world, things are now stable. Got a good job, it's stable. I won't lose it. People don't lose jobs. I mean, they're stable jobs, and I've got one of the stable ones. And my kids are healthy. I'm not like those other parents that have unhealthy children. Mine are not like that. They're healthy. I got the healthy kind. And they're really nice too. I'm sure they'll be nice when they get to be teenagers. If they're nice when they're little kids, how can they'll be nice. I'm sure it's going to work out well. They'll love me forever. And they'll be so grateful that I was such a good parent. They'll just come and say, "Good morning, Dad. I love you. You're such a great dad." It'll be every day. Kids are that way. I'm sure my kids will be. Your kids maybe not, but my kids will be like that. We're living in a dream. This is dreamlike nature reality. We're superimposing on something fundamentally, almost entirely out of our control. It's very difficult to bear, and always in a state of flux. And we superimpose upon it the sense that my kids do what I say, my spouse, she really listens to me, or I listen to her, and things are stable, and we live in that world. We take comfort in that world, and we're dreaming, because there is no such world. It exists only in our fantasy, but we conflate the fantasy with reality. And then people get shocked. We're just ready to be shocked. I had this stable job and my company was just sold. I can't believe it. They told me I'd have this job for the rest of my life. They told me I'd have a pension, and then I don't. And how could this be? How could this be? Or this child, I knew this child so well, and the child died. We get shocked when there's some abrupt change. We get shocked, surprised. Oh, Joe was so healthy. I just saw him last week. He was so healthy. And now he's dead. How can that be? He was so healthy. We get shocked, and we wake up briefly to the reality that this is happening every single day. So that, to see through the veils of this superimposed stability, unchanging quality, is to wake up to the reality of impermanence and see if you can bear it. Bear it. The utter fragility of one's own life, regardless of how healthy you are, how old you are, the utter fragility of human life, so delicately in the balance, so ready to die at any moment, relationships ready to crumble at any moment, everything subject to decay. Is it possible to face that reality face on, unflinchingly, without averting one's gaze? Is it possible to face the reality of impermanence and be light and cheerful, joyful and content, and truly happy? And there's an answer to that question. Insofar as we're investing our life, our energy, our vision, our intelligence, efforts, and all of that, insofar as we're investing this in the pursuit of hedonia, which pretty much boils down to the pursuit of three things, as far as I can tell. Wealth, you can buy hedonia. If you have enough money, you can buy it. Power, influence, then you can make things happen because you have influence. You can get hedonia with influence. Prestige, if you're very famous, people really respect you. You can milk that. You can milk it. And so people in celebrity status, they can get away with a lot. Because after all, they're celebrities. And so they can, so those three things, then we can use to try to acquire and hold on to hedonia, pleasure that we get from the world. But insofar as we're invested in hedonia, then we just will not be able to bear impermanence, because it makes the whole thing look like a farce. If we really explore what the sages of the world have been exploring for 4,000 years, another type of well-being, the Greeks called one hedonia, and that's what we get from the world. It's stimulus-driven. It's by acquisition, fame, power, sensual pleasures, and so forth. That's hedonia. Everybody knows about hedonia. Animals know about hedonia. They know everything they need to know about hedonia. But Socrates and Plato, Aristotle, Buddha and Zhuangzi and Augustine, and the list goes on, great philosophers, great scholars, great theologians, and now an increasing number of very, very insightful psychologists working in the field of positive psychology recognize that there's another entire domain of sukha, of well-being. And it's not what you get from the world, it's what you bring to it. And therefore, even as the world changes, your own sukha, your sense of well-being, of contentment, of fearlessness, of freedom from anxiety, does not need to pass, even though the world around you does. Now that's wisdom. You don't see that easily, but it's everywhere. It's in religion, it's philosophy, and now we have it in science. So, but insofar as we're following, what do you call it, treadmill of hedonia, then you just better ignore impermanence as much as you can, because it's going to take all the fun out. It's going to be a buzzkill, a party pooper. It's going to take all the joy out if you really focus on the reality of suffering. As one of my favorite comedians, Lily Tomlin, said, the problem with the rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat. So the dreamlike nature of mistaking that which is impermanent as being permanent, that's dream. You're dreaming. You're in a fantasy world. But insofar as you're invested in hedonia, you have very good reason to maintaining that dream as long as you can, until you can't. And it's going to be aging, it's going to be sickness, it's going to be death, but you know how it ends. Aging, sickness, death. It's going to be one of those three, and death sooner or later, that's going to be it. That's how the story ends in this chapter, is you're dead, and all that you've acquired is now gone up into nothing. I wish every 5-year-old learned that, because it's an obvious truth. Because in America, polls have been done of young people, and it's something like 80%, what is your life goal? I think it's something like 80% said, I want to be rich. Somebody should have told them. You know, the evidence is in. Why are you striving for that? Don't you want to be happy? Or would you rather just be rich and live on antidepressants? And so that's the first of the dreamlike nature of reality, this entry level that's right there in the foundation. And the second one is very interesting. It's called, if we use the Sanskrit terms, because we don't have direct correlates in English, mistaking dukkha for sukha. And dukkha doesn't just mean suffering. It's not just suffering. Only the most blatant form of dukkha actually feels bad. Physical pain, mental pain. But I think the closest that gets the flavor of what's meant by dukkha is unsatisfying. Unsatisfying. So the Buddha never said life is suffering, because that's simple. Children playing joyfully in a playground, their parents looking after them with love, having a great time. Don't tell me that's suffering. You're having a good time. That's sukha. It's transient. It's pretty nice. That's not suffering. But is it satisfying? Can the kids play there forever? Will they always be safe? Will they ever grow up? Will they ever meet misfortune, tragedy, sadness, and loss? And so the phrase here, Buddha never said life is suffering. That's just stupid. Just like the root of all suffering is desire. That's just as stupid. And the notion that the self doesn't exist, that's just one more stupid thing. These are all just crude misrepresentations. Let's throw those out. But what we do find is the actual theme. It comes out very clearly in Tibetan. Zakche tamche dungal wa in Tibetan. And zakche means tainted, contaminated, defiled. All that is tainted, contaminated, or defiled is dungal wa, which means unsatisfying. What does it mean to be contaminated, defiled? Try this on for science. This is science, not philosophy or religion. Just, you can test it. And that is, here's the assertion, that whatever we experience we have, whether it's anything, winning a lottery, having a wonderful marriage, healthy kids, living a virtuous life, whatever it is, whatever experience we have, insofar as, because it's not just yes or no, insofar as it is filtered by mental afflictions, that mental afflictions are implicated in the very nature of your experience of it. Delusion, craving, hostility, but they're there in the fabric, they're in the fabric of your experience. Then you will find sooner or later, sooner if you keep your eyes open, later if you close your eyes, you'll find that whatever you're experiencing turns out to be unsatisfying. Including a relationship with a guru, including taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, anything at all, insofar as that craving, hostility, and ignorance are in there, part of the fabric, then sooner or later, it's only a matter of time, we'll feel disappointed, unsatisfied. It didn't turn out as we hoped. We thought the guru would be such and such, and then turned out not to be. We thought the religion would be, we thought the institutions, the monastics, or what have you. We thought the marriage would be, the children would be, the job would be. And so we put our hopes up in objectifying the source of our happiness. I'm happy now, I've got a wonderful guru. I found my spiritual path. I've got great kids, a wonderful spouse. I've got a good job. I'm in good health, etc., etc. We objectify the actual source of our happiness, and we think, I'm happy because, and then we point to. It could be spiritual, it could be completely hedonistic, it could be all kinds of things. And so we're pointing to something that it's not intrinsically unsatisfying, as if there's something unsatisfying. Is there something, I think it's lemon ginger without honey. It's much better with honey, by the way. But that liquid there, is it by nature is it unsatisfying? It's just liquid. It's not sukha or dukkha, it's liquid. with a bit of ginger lemon taste. That's it. So there's nothing unsatisfying about the cup. It's just a cup. And the liquid inside is just a liquid inside. There's nothing unsatisfying about it. This is not unsatisfying. This is not dukkha. It's liquid. It's a cup. But if I look upon this, let's just take this as a symbol. This could be a spouse, it could be children, a job, status, anything you like. But let's take this as a symbol. Here it is. This is what makes me happy. I finally found what really makes me happy. And you fill in the blank. So here's just a little symbol for it. I said, oh, thank goodness, the cup. I found the cup. The perfect cup. My soulmate cup. With a perfect ambrosial liquid inside. That just is the fulfillment, everything I ever wanted from liquid, it's right there. You fulfill me. I've been looking for you my whole life, and now I found you. Oh, dear cup, never leave me. Because you make me so happy. So I'm now objectifying the source of my happiness to the cup. Of course, it's silly, but you can fill in the blank. Then sooner or later, we're going to find this cup's kind of getting heavy in my hand. And it's only half full. And so insofar as I view the cup as the actual source of my happiness, you make me happy, then sooner or later I'm going to find that's not true. I really thought you make me happy, but now you just feel kind of heavy. And you used to be really hot. I mean, you were so hot. And now I just have to say, you're lukewarm. You're just not doing it for me anymore. Lukewarm ginger tea? I mean, who gets excited about that? I really had my hopes up that this would be the cup. But I think it's time for us, I think we need some space from each other. Amicably. But you go your way and I go, and I'm going to look for another cup. Definitely, whose contents are hotter and sweeter. And I think that may be the one. This one turned out to be a big disappointment. This one's unsatisfying. But the next one, I'm sure there are better cups around. This is okay, but there are better ones. And beyond ginger lemon, Earl Grey with cream, definitely better. So that's why it's unsatisfying. There's nothing unsatisfying with this person or that person, this place, this job. There's nothing objectively unsatisfying about any of them at all. They are just what they are. It's a job, it's a place, it's money, it's a person. But when we go into the dreamlike state of thinking this person, this cup, fill in the blank, whatever the cup is going to be for you, and we think this is what makes me happy. I'm pointing to it, there it is. That's called attachment. And it's also rooted in delusion. Because there's nothing out there that is actually the source of our happiness. Never has been, never will be. Not some image of the Buddha, not some external guru, not some text, not some holy scripture, not monastic robes or anything else. There's nothing out there that is the source of our happiness. They just are what they are. But if we enter into this dreamlike state of superimposing that which isn't there as being there, and thinking, now I find happiness, and we point to it, then it's only a matter of time. It's like a ticking time bomb. It's just a matter of time before that on which we've superimposed, this makes me happy. This is the source of my happiness. The show will be over. And then we'll find, I thought it really would make me happy, but I have to say, I'm really disappointed. It turned out to be really deeply unsatisfying. I had big hopes that it wouldn't be, but it let me down, whatever the it was. The job, the university degree, you name it. The prestige. I've met some very famous people. I've met some incredibly attractive people. I met some really rich people, the richest one I probably ever met. I'll keep it a bit anonymous, but apparently he's fabulously wealthy. He couldn't even get through a meal. I had a meal with him. He couldn't even get through a meal. He seemed glum and heavy the whole meal, hardly spoke. And then halfway through the meal, he got up from the meal and went off with his, back then it was BlackBerry, because the markets in Germany had opened. And the markets in Germany open means stop whatever you're doing. You're a slave. Now check your BlackBerry. Manage your hedge funds. Make $1 billion here, make 100,000, 100 million here. And that was it, and that was his life. I wouldn't trade my life for that person's life for $1 trillion. But he wanted it. Most people don't get that wealthy. He wanted it, he got it, and I didn't see a glimmer of any kind of satisfaction, joy, lightness, cheerfulness, contentment. I didn't see a glimmer. I don't mean to be judgmental, but show something. You're so rich, you can buy anything. And all he had was a BlackBerry. So that's a second dream, a dream state where people just so filled with their concepts that they're living in this conceptual fantasy unrelated to what's actually going on. At one point it looked like I was very close to getting a very prestigious job in academia. I'll keep it anonymous. But it looked really, really good. And a lot of money had been given for me to get this job. It'd be very, very high status. And I didn't really want it, but if I took that job, I thought I could do some good in the world. And I wrote to His Holiness, my root guru, and said, if they offer me this job, shall I accept it? He said, yeah, go for it. Because they'll always encourage you to be of service. And so it looked like it was very, very close that I would get it. It seemed like it was pretty much a shoo-in. And I looked at it before knowing whether I'd get it or not, although it seemed very likely. And it was very clear to me, if I get this job, I'll keep on persuading myself from day to day to day, I'm happy. Because there won't be anything coming from outside. I'll be happy because I'm living in this conceptual world. Wow, great university, full professorship, high status, a lot of respect coming. I'll just have to remind myself, you should be happy now. And my happiness will be buoyed up by a bunch of concepts, but it won't be delivered up. And I thought, well, if His Holiness would like me to serve in that way, I'll do my very best. But I'll simply have to remind myself, be happy, be happy. And they didn't want me. Yay! Because I didn't really want them either. So now I'm just jobless, and I just talk about Dharma, and I'm very happy with that. And I practice a lot. I really love practicing. That's the one thing I like better than talking about Dharma, is being quiet and practicing it. But that, if you get that job, and then you persuade yourself, oh, I'm at such world-class university, and I got this job, and people respect me, and all the, oh, look, oh, wow. If you think that's going to be satisfying, you might want to wake up. So that's the second one. And the third one's the most interesting, and then I think it's time to take a break. The third one, but it really is a dream, isn't it? To persuade yourself, I must be happy. I knew a lot of people in Silicon Valley, because Stanford's right there, and I was there for 6 years. And some people I knew were pretty wealthy. And what they called it, these entrepreneurs, startups, the IPOs, isn't that what it's called? IPO? Get right? IPO? IPO? Startups, yeah. Oh, they called them, when they made it, because I met some people who really made it, you know? They put in the 16-hour days for as long as necessary, and they got it, they got the contracts, and it's growing and growing. And the people I spoke with, I'm not saying they're all unhappy, but they're all certainly workaholics, is they call them golden handcuffs. You've probably heard that one, yeah? Golden handcuffs. I mean, it was solid gold. I mean, they really had made it. What all the other ones are aspiring for, they achieved it, you know? And yet, they couldn't back off. They didn't have the key for the handcuffs because they didn't know how to go into reverse. If they stop working, then their kids don't get to college. They can't pay the mortgage. Probably can't even pay for life insurance or health insurance. And so they can't quit because you're totally screwed. Then you're just homeless. Because you've entered into a lifestyle that just demands you keep on making a lot of money. And you're making progress if you get into a better house and you make more money and then more debts and more obligations. And I know some people have escaped. And the only escape route is either quit or find Dharma. And I've known both. But in the midst of that, because some of the work they do is tremendously great service. I know one, he started in the ground of a big company, that's now I think a multi-billion-dollar company, creating pure energy, you know, solar. It's really a great service. But he and his wife, before encountering Dharma, both extremely successful, bright and hardworking, and fundamentally finding the whole situation unsatisfying. They succeeded in finding unsatisfying. But they're still there, both of them doing wonderful work, really contributing, and they're finding Dharma, and Dharma is what they find satisfying. So that's the second dreamlike nature of reality, of just throwing open the curtains and see what really makes you happy, and not mistaking that which is by nature unsatisfying when you invest too much in it, thinking it will yield that which it cannot possibly yield. and then concluding that it is unsatisfying. Whereas the only thing that made it unsatisfying was your own mental afflictions. Not the job, not the spouse, not the money, not anything else. And then we move to the deepest waters, and you know where we're going. And this is one more massive dream. It's really so dreamlike. And that is the simple one. You've heard it so many times already. And that is mistaking that which is neither I nor mine as being such. And just that it was so deeply habituated, ingrained to do that. Looking into the mirror and seeing ourselves. How do I look today? Looking at our health, identifying with that. Looking at our family, my job, my possessions, my reputation, my etc., etc. And thinking that there's something my about any of it. And there just isn't. Nothing's really mine. If it were mine, I could keep it. If it were really mine, I could control it. But what can I really control? I can't even control my mind. I certainly can't control my body. I just make it younger. And always healthy. And much better looking. But it's not mine, it's just doing its thing, it's just getting older. So if the mind were mine, I could control it, but it's not. The body isn't mine, it's just a body. And everything outside of my skin that I somehow imagine as mine, nothing from their side indicates that. It's just a car, it's just a house, it's simply a spouse, a human being, friends and so forth, a city. Santa Barbara's my city, but I don't think anybody in Santa Barbara knows that. Surprise to them, oh, we all belong to Alan. Fancy that. When did he buy us? You know? But taking it seriously, lightheartedly, we can say the city of Santa Barbara is there for me because I can go shopping there, get my car serviced there, get gasoline and so forth. It's there for me, it's the nearest city. That's very cool, so I have a city, it's called Santa Barbara. But there's nothing remotely in it, not even an atom that actually belongs to me, but imagining that it does. Imagining that there's something out there or in here that is actually me. Imagining that. And when we imagine that, we take it seriously, we reify it. We really take it seriously. This is mine. What were you thinking? Don't you know who you're talking to? Somebody once asked me, are you the Alan Wallace? And I said, yeah! Taking ourselves seriously, as if there's really someone here. You know. And all that's a dream. You look for yourself, where do you ever find yourself? You just see matter and thoughts and images, nowhere to be found. And nothing that, apart from mere convention, is mine. But dreaming that it is. I'm really here and this is really mine. This is really mine. One might pause there just for a moment and then we'll take our break. Say, okay, the body comes and goes, mind comes and goes, no question about that. We die, you lose your body, you lose your mind. And everything you've acquired, loved ones, friends, acquisitions, wealth, even reputation, all of that comes and goes. But no, they don't, that's kind of obvious, right? They're not really ours because they're just here for a while and then they're not. But how about that substrate consciousness? How about that substrate consciousness? Isn't that really mine? And the answer is, who are you? If you think, you as in this guy here, this California guy, I have a substrate consciousness? It has me. It was before I am. It will continue after I am. How can I have it? This would be like an ant crawling up the side of a mountain and say, this is my mountain. You're the ant. The mountain was here before you were here. It will be here after you're gone. So to say that the substrate consciousness is mine, who are you kidding? I won't even remember who I am. In the bardo, just get a couple of weeks into it, you can't even remember who you were in the last lifetime, let alone next lifetime. Chances are you probably won't remember who you were this time. So to say it's mine, what does that even mean? So I don't think so. So those are the three dreamlike natures where we can live in a fantasy world of thinking that which is not just thinking, but viewing, apprehending, clinging to, that which by nature is impermanent, as somehow more stable than it is. That which is by nature is not a source of happiness, thinking it is, and then lo and behold finding sooner or later that it's unsatisfying. Only because we had more expectations than it can bear. only because we viewed it with mental afflictions. Otherwise, nothing's unsatisfying. Not thunder, not lightning, not water, not floods, not fire. It's just fire, it's just floods. It's not unsatisfying. It is just what it is, what it is. It's unsatisfying only because of our mental afflictions. And if we don't have mental afflictions, all experiences imbued with mental afflictions are unsatisfying. Sooner or later, they're just going to show their face. But if you are freed of mental afflictions, and this is a factual statement, it's really quite astonishing. But if you're free of mental afflictions, you can be living in a concentration camp and be very content. I know that's true. I've met people like that. Garchen Rinpoche, Yangchen Rinpoche. I've met others as well. You can be living in the most dire of circumstances and really find nothing unsatisfying. I've met, this is one of the greatest blessing of my life, is I've met so many extraordinary people that show the bandwidth. It's not a little world, it's a big world. And recognizing, wow, if you're free of the internal causes of suffering, then you're free of suffering wherever you are. I'll end on one anecdote. Very early in my Dharma studies, 1972 or 3, but studying pretty intensively. Learned about the 6 realms, the hell realms and all of that, and I just couldn't help but take them kind of seriously. Because it seemed like the Buddha didn't make these up to scare people, like the boogeyman, that he must have said it because he saw it. So I had this confidence, I think, boy, these probably are as real as anything else. And I remember going to Geshe Gon Taike, who was really my primary teacher. I studied with him 6 days a week. A brilliant teacher, and a yogi, really formidable yogi. And I remember going to him one day and said, Geshe-la, I really, really don't want to go to the lower realms next time. I really don't want to, so I'm going to practice Dharma well. And he looked at me a little bit stern. You don't want to go to hell? Oh, shame on you. You should be willing to go to hell. If you can go to hell and help people, you should go to hell. Don't cringe. Oh, I don't want to. Buck up. Stiff upper lip, old chap. Something like that in Tibetan. But you should be willing to go to hell. If you can help people there, alleviate their suffering, then don't fear it. Be bold, go. So I went to Switzerland. I'll get to hell a little bit later. But Switzerland, Santa Barbara, Tuscany, I've been checking out the scene, it's really pretty okay. So I'm still girding my loins, ready to go to hell. I'm still bracing myself for that one, to be able to joyfully go. And that is the Bodhisattva's mission. Wherever you can be a benefit, you go there. And you don't necessarily have to suffer at all. Here we are. Hola, Sohu. It's 5 minutes past. Let's come back at 4:35. I'll go back to practice.